A millionaire is stunned when his new black maid wears his mother's pendant. As the truth unfolds, what family's secret will be revealed, shaking everyone to the core? And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. Ryan Thompson stood at the window of his corner office on the 42nd floor of Thompson Enterprises, watching the morning bustle of downtown Seattle below. His attention shifted to the new employee orientation happening in the conference room across the hall. Through the glass walls, he observed the newest addition to his company's financial analysis team, Mia Chen. The morning light caught her profile as she focused intently on the orientation presenter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her posture spoke of someone who took their work seriously. Ryan noticed how she took detailed notes, her pen moving steadily across the paper while other new hires seemed more interested in their phones or the complimentary pastries. What caught his attention wasn't her beauty, though she was certainly attractive in an understated way, but rather the intensity of her focus. In 15 years of running the company, he developed an eye for identifying exceptional talent, and something about Mia's demeanor suggested she might be exactly what the financial department needed. The orientation wrapped up at noon, and Ryan watched as the new employees filtered out toward the break room. He made his way to his afternoon meetings, his mind occasionally drifting back to the determined new hire. The next few days passed in a blur of quarterly reports and board meetings until Wednesday afternoon's department-wide financial review. Mia sat near the middle of the conference table, her laptop open and ready. Unlike many new employees who tried to blend into the background during their first week, she spoke up 3 times during the meeting, each contribution demonstrating a thorough understanding of the company's recent market challenges. It was during her second comment about restructuring the Asian market approach that Ryan noticed it, a silver pendant that caught the fluorescent light as she gestured. The piece was unusual, a small, intricate design featuring what appeared to be a compass rose surrounded by delicate filigree work. Ryan felt his breath catch in his throat. He'd seen that design before, in an old photograph of his mother, wearing an identical piece. The meeting continued, but Ryan found himself distracted by the pendant. His mother had lost hers decades ago, or at least that's what she'd claimed. He'd found her crying over its disappearance when he was 12, though she'd quickly composed herself when she realized he was watching. It was one of the few times he'd seen his always controlled mother display raw emotion. After the meeting concluded, Ryan made his way toward Mia's seat, careful to maintain a professional demeanor despite his burning curiosity. She was gathering her materials, the pendant now partially hidden by her blazer. "Miss Chun," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Excellent observations about the Asian market. I particularly appreciated your insight about our distribution challenges in Singapore." Mia looked up, surprise briefly crossing her features before she masked it with professional courtesy. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I spent some time reviewing the quarterly reports from our international divisions before the meeting. The patterns were quite clear once you looked at the historical data." "That pendant you're wearing," Ryan said, gesturing slightly. "It's quite unique. May I ask where you got it?" The change in Mia's demeanor was subtle but immediate. Her shoulders tensed slightly, and her hand moved unconsciously to touch the silver piece. "It's a family heirloom," she said, her tone polite but firm. "My grandmother gave it to my mother, and she passed it on to me." "I see," Ryan replied, noting her defensive posture. "It reminded me of something similar I once saw. Thank you again for your contributions to the meeting." As he walked back to his office, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Mia's reaction had been more than simple privacy. There had been something in her eyes, a wariness, perhaps even fear, when he'd asked about the pendant. Combined with its startling similarity to his mother's lost piece, the interaction left him with an unsettling sense that he'd stumbled onto something significant. He spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to review contracts while his mind wandered to old memories, his mother's tears over the lost pendant, her occasional distant looks when she thought no one was watching, and the way she'd sometimes start to say something about her past before stopping herself abruptly. He'd always attributed these moments to the eccentricities of a wealthy woman with too much time on her hands. Now, Watching Mia through his office window as she walked to the elevator, her hand still protectively covering the pendant, he wondered if he'd been missing something important all along. That evening, Ryan's Tesla autopilot through the quiet streets of his upscale neighborhood while his mind wandered back to the pendant. The similarity was too striking to be coincidence. After parking in the circular driveway of his modernist mansion, he headed straight for the East Wing, where his mother's belongings remained untouched since her passing 2 years ago. The room still held her perfume's ghost, Chanel No. 5 mixed with old papers and leather-bound books. Ryan moved methodically through the space, starting with her mahogany desk. The drawers contained the expected items: expensive stationery, fountain pens, and carefully organized correspondence. Nothing unusual emerged until he reached the bottom drawer, where his fingers detected a slight irregularity in the wood grain. Pressing firmly, a hidden compartment clicked open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. The spine crackled as he opened it, revealing his mother's elegant handwriting. The first entry was dated April 15, 1985. Today I saw him again at the community center. Every fiber of my being screams that this is wrong, that I'm betraying everything my family stands for. But when Marcus speaks about his dreams, his passion for education and equality, I forget about the expectations weighing on my shoulders. For those brief moments, I'm not Elizabeth Thompson, heiress to the Thompson fortune. I'm just Beth, a woman falling in love with a man who sees the world as it could be, not as it is. Ryan sank into his mother's reading chair, his hands trembling slightly. Marcus. The name stirred something in his memory, a fragment of an overheard conversation, his mother speaking in hushed tones on the phone late at night. He read on. June 3rd, 1985. Marcus showed me his grandmother's pendant today. The craftsmanship is exquisite, a compass rose surrounded by the most delicate silver work I've ever seen. He explained that it was passed down through generations of his family, originally brought from China by his great-grandmother. When he placed it in my hands, I felt the weight of history it carried. More than that, I felt the weight of what we're risking. A Thompson and a Chun, meeting in secret like teenagers instead of grown adults. Father would disown me if he knew. Ryan's breath caught in his throat.
Chun.
Mia's surname echoed in his mind. The pendant wasn't simply similar to his mother's, it was the same one. But how had it passed from Marcus Chun to Mia's family? The journal entries continued, documenting the growing relationship between Elizabeth Thompson and Marcus Chun. His mother's normally controlled writing became more passionate, more urgent as the months progressed. She wrote about Marcus's work as a community organizer, his dreams of bridging the divide between Seattle's wealthy elite and its struggling communities, and the growing difficulty of maintaining their secret. September 12, 1985, the pregnancy test was positive. I've never felt such conflicting emotions, complete joy and utter terror wrestling in my chest. Marcus wants to go public, to face whatever consequences come our way. He doesn't understand that in my world, some sins are unforgivable. A Thompson heir with Chinese-American blood? Father's heart condition wouldn't survive the scandal. And yet, when I think of his child, our child, I feel a fierce protectiveness I've never known before. Ryan stopped reading, his hands gripping the journal so tightly his knuckles turned white. The implications of what he'd just read threatened to overwhelm him. His father, or rather, the man he'd thought was his father, had passed away 5 years ago. William Thompson had been the epitome of old money aristocracy, a man whose approval Ryan had spent his entire life trying to earn. The sound of his phone, ringing, startled him back to the present. It was Sarah, his sister, probably calling about their weekly dinner plans. He let it go to voicemail, needing time to process what he'd discovered. Looking back at the journal, he noticed something falling from between its pages, a photograph, worn at the edges. In it, his mother stood next to a handsome Asian man, both of them smiling at the camera with a kind of unguarded joy Ryan had never seen in his mother's carefully composed society photographs. Around her neck hung the pendant, the same one he'd seen on Mia today. The back of the photo bore a simple inscription, Beth and Marcus, Summer '85. remember that love knows no boundaries. The implications were staggering. If what he was reading was true, then everything he believed about his identity, his family, and his place in Seattle society was built on a foundation of lies. And Mia, was she related to Marcus Chen? The coincidence seemed too great to ignore. Ryan spent hours in that room, reading entry after entry as his mother's secret life unfolded before him. The journal ended abruptly in late 1985, with no explanation of what happened to Marcus or how the pendant had found its way to Mia. But one thing was clear. Ryan Thompson was not who he thought he was, and the elegant woman he'd seen wearing the pendant at work might hold the key to understanding his true identity. After her encounter with Ryan Thompson, Mia rushed home to her modest two-bedroom apartment in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. Her daughter, Lucy, was already asleep, the babysitter having tucked her in hours ago. Mia paid the sitter and went straight to her bedroom closet, where she kept a carved wooden box her grandmother had given her before passing away. Inside the box, beneath layers of tissue paper, lay an envelope she hadn't opened in years. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, remembering her grandmother's words. "Read this when you're ready to understand why our family carries such heavy secrets." The day her grandmother gave her the pendant, she'd also handed her this letter, but Mia had been too scared to read it until now. The paper was thick and expensive, unlike anything her working-class family typically used. Her grandmother's elegant handwriting filled 3 pages. "My dearest Mia, if you're reading this, you're wearing the pendant that changed the course of our family's history. It's time you learned the truth about your grandfather, Marcus Chen, and the love story that both blessed and cursed our family. In 1985, your grandfather was working as a community organizer in Seattle's International District. Despite having a law degree from Berkeley, he chose to work with underprivileged communities, believing he could make a real difference. That's where he met Elizabeth Thompson, a woman from Seattle's wealthiest family who volunteered at the community center. Their love was instant and profound, but in 1985, a relationship between a Chinese-American man and a white woman from old money was more than forbidden. It was dangerous to everything they both held dear. They met in secret for months, sharing dreams of a future where their love wouldn't have to hide in shadows. Elizabeth wore this pendant, a Chun family heirloom, as a symbol of their commitment. When she discovered she was pregnant, they planned to defy both their families and build a life together. But Elizabeth's father, William Thompson, learned of their relationship. He threatened to destroy your grandfather's career and ensure he'd never work in law or community organizing again. Worse, he threatened to use his influence to harm Marcus's family's businesses in the International District. Elizabeth disappeared shortly after. We learned later that her father had sent her to Europe, claiming she needed treatment for nervous exhaustion. When she returned months later, she was married to Richard Thompson, and the newspapers announced the birth of their son, Ryan. Your grandfather was heartbroken, but he understood Elizabeth's choice to protect both their families. He married me, your grandmother, a year later, and we had your mother. But he never forgot Elizabeth or their child. The pendant came back to us anonymously, delivered to our door with no note. Marcus recognized it as a message, Elizabeth's way of saying goodbye and ensuring a piece of our family's heritage remained with us. Marcus passed away never knowing his firstborn son, but he made me promise to keep this pendant in the family, hoping that someday the truth would find its way into the light. When your mother married and had you, I knew the pendant would be yours, just as I knew you would one day work your way into the Thompson world through your own merit. Your new position at Thompson Enterprises isn't a coincidence, Mia. Our families are bound by blood and history, though few know it. Ryan Thompson, your new employer, is your uncle, your mother's half-brother, though he doesn't know it. I've watched his career from afar, seeing echoes of your grandfather in his drive to modernize his company's approach to community relations. I know this truth is a heavy burden, but you're stronger than you realize. What you do with this information is your choice. The pendant has always represented our family's resilience in the face of prejudice and power. Now it's your turn to decide its next chapter. Mia sat on her bed, the letter falling from her numb fingers. Down the hall, She could hear Lucy's soft breathing through the baby monitor. Her daughter's entire future could be affected by what she did with this information. She called her mother, not caring about the late hour. When Helen Chin answered, her voice was alert despite the time, as if she'd been waiting for this call. "Mom," Mia said, her voice barely steady. "I need you to tell me everything about grandfather Marcus and Elizabeth Thompson. And I need to know why you never told me that Ryan Thompson is my uncle." Helen's sigh carried decades of buried pain. "Come over tomorrow after work. There's so much more to the story, and you need to understand all of it before you decide what to do." "But Mia, remember, the Thompsons destroyed your grandfather's dreams once. Be very careful about how close you let them get to you and Lucy." As Mia hung up the phone, she touched the pendant at her throat. The compass rose design seemed to take on new meaning, no longer just a family heirloom, but a guide pointing toward a truth that could either heal old wounds or create new ones. She thought of Ryan's face when he'd asked about the pendant, seeing now what she'd missed before, the same eyes as her grandfather, staring out from old photographs, the same determination to understand the truth, no matter the cost. The following evening, Ryan drove to Sarah's Victorian mansion in Queen and Hill, the diary securely tucked in his briefcase. His sister had always been the keeper of family history maintaining their mother's social connections and preserving the Thompson legacy with an almost religious devotion. If anyone knew the truth about his mother's relationship with Marcus Chen, it would be Sarah. He found her in the conservatory, surrounded by the orchids she meticulously cultivated. At 45, Sarah Thompson Pierce remained the picture of Seattle aristocracy, her silver-streaked hair perfectly styled and her posture impeccable. She looked up from her flowers, her smile fading as she registered the tension in her brother's face. "You've missed 3 calls," she said, setting down her pruning shears. "I was beginning to worry." Ryan placed the diary on the glass table between them. "I found this in Mother's desk, hidden in a false drawer bottom." Sarah's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, a slight stiffening of her shoulders, a tightening around her eyes. She knew something. Mother's old journal? "I hardly see why that would require such dramatics, Ryan." "Don't." Ryan's voice was sharp. "You've always been an excellent liar, Sarah, but this time I need the truth. Did you know about Marcus Chin?" The color drained from Sarah's face. She turned away, moving to the orchid collection with mechanical precision. "You shouldn't have gone through Mother's private things. Some matters are better left in the past." "Better for whom?" Ryan pressed. "Better for Father, who raised another man's son without knowing. Better for you, maintaining the perfect Thompson facade? Or better for Marcus Chen's family, who lost everything because of our father's threats?" Sarah whirled around, her composed mask cracking. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Those were different times, Ryan. Father did what he thought was necessary to protect our family's position, our future, your future." "My future?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "My entire life is built on a lie. I'm not even a Thompson by blood." "Blood isn't everything," Sarah snapped. "Father loved you. He chose to raise you as his own, to give you every advantage, every opportunity. Do you think Marcus Chen could have provided that? A community organizer with radical ideas about social change." "So you did know him?" Sarah's shoulders sagged. "I knew of him. I was 17 when it happened. I overheard Father's phone calls, saw Mother crying in her room. When she returned from Europe, Father made it clear that we were never to speak of that time. The pregnancy, the marriage to Richard, your birth, it was all carefully orchestrated to prevent scandal." "And Marcus? What happened to him?" "Father made sure he left Seattle. His family's businesses were struggling. A few words in the right ears about health code violations, tax audits, denied permits. It was gentle persuasion, Father called it. Marcus chose to leave rather than watch his family suffer." Ryan thought of Mia, her competence and determination. His family stayed, though. They survived. "The Chens are survivors," Sarah admitted. "They rebuilt, kept to themselves, stayed out of our circles. It was better that way. Cleaner." "Cleaner," Ryan repeated. "Like Mother's tears were clean? Like erasing a man's entire existence from his son's life was clean?" I protected you. Sarah's voice rose. When Mother died, I made sure those old papers stayed buried. I kept her secrets, maintained our position in society. Everything I've done has been to protect this family. No, Ryan said quietly. Everything you've done has been to protect a lie. And now Mia Chen works for me, wearing her grandfather's pendant, the same pendant Mother wore when she was in love with Marcus. Sarah went very still. Mia Chen? The new financial analyst. Her laugh was brittle. Oh, God. You haven't. Please tell me you haven't spoken to her about this. Not yet, but I will. You'll destroy everything. The company, our reputation, the Thompson name. The Thompson name isn't mine to protect, Ryan interrupted. And maybe it's time for some destruction. Maybe we've all lived too long with these perfect lies. Sarah moved closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Think about what you're doing. Father's old associates still sit on the board. The conservative families whose investments keep Thompson Enterprises strong. How do you think they'll react to this scandal? Everything you've built could crumble. Or it could become something better. Something honest.
There's no honesty in this, Ryan.
Only pain. Old wounds that should stay buried. Sarah touched his arm.
Please.
Let the past remain in the past. Ryan pulled away. The past isn't past anymore, Sarah. It's sitting in my office every day, wearing a pendant that tells a story we've tried to hide for 35 years. I need to know the whole truth. Then you'll have to find it without my help. Sarah turned back to her orchids. And Ryan? Remember that some truths are like poison. They destroy everything they touch. He left her there among her perfect flowers, the diary heavy in his briefcase. His sister's warnings echoed in his mind, but they only strengthened his resolve. Somewhere in Seattle, Mia Chen held pieces of his history. And one way or another, he would uncover the full story of who he really was. The International District hadn't changed as dramatically as other parts of Seattle. While gleaming towers rose downtown, this neighborhood retained much of its character from the 1980s. Ryan parked his Tesla near the intersection mentioned in his mother's diary, 8th and King, feeling acutely aware of how out of place his expensive car looked among the modest businesses and worn apartment buildings. The community center his mother wrote about still stood, though its red brick facade had weathered considerably. A sign above the entrance read, International District Community Center, serving our community since 1972. Ryan checked his mother's diary entry again. Marcus always stayed late on Thursdays, teaching English to elderly residents and helping them with citizenship paperwork. Inside, the building smelled of floor wax and aging radiators. Faded photographs lined the hallway, documenting decades of community events. Ryan moved slowly, scanning faces until he stopped abruptly before a group photo dated 1985. There, in the back row, stood his mother and Marcus Chen, standing slightly apart from the other volunteers but undeniably together. His mother's face glowed with an happiness he'd never seen in their formal family portraits. That was a good year for the center, a voice said behind him. Ryan turned to find an elderly Chinese man watching him with keen interest. Not many people stop to look at the old photos anymore. I'm researching family history, Ryan said carefully. Did you work here in the 80s? The man nodded, introducing himself as Mr. Wu. For 40 years, I ran the citizenship programs. Now I just come by to play mahjong with old friends. He peered more closely at Ryan. You look familiar. Something about the eyes. Did you know Marcus Chen? Ryan asked directly. Mr. Wu's expression shifted subtly. Ah, now I see it. You're Elizabeth's boy. He gestured toward a bench nearby. Sit. Some stories shouldn't be told standing up. As they settled onto the worn wooden bench, Mr. Wu spoke quietly. Marcus was one of our best volunteers. Brilliant lawyer, could have made fortune at big firm, but he chose to help people here instead. Your mother started coming to our ESL program, saying she wanted to understand her family's Chinese cook better. But we all knew she really came to see Marcus. What kind of man was he? Ryan asked, hungry for details about his biological father. Passionate. Believed in justice, in fighting the system from within. He had plans to create legal aid network for immigrant businesses to help them stand up to big developers. That's what got him in trouble with your grandfather. Mr. Wu shook his head slowly. William Thompson didn't just want Marcus away from Elizabeth. He wanted to crush Marcus's dreams of empowering our community. The business closures in the neighborhood, that was my grandfather? Health inspections, permit problems, tax audits. All very legal, very proper. But we knew where the pressure came from. Marcus's family lost their restaurant. Other businesses that supported his legal aid project suddenly had problems with their loans. The message was clear: leave Elizabeth, or watch the neighborhood suffer. Ryan felt sick. The Thompson fortune he'd inherited, the privilege he'd enjoyed his entire life, it was built partly on the systematic destruction of his own father's community. But some businesses survived. The Chens rebuilt. Mr. Wu's eyes crinkled. You know about the Chens? Yes, they survived. Marcus's younger brother took over what was left of family businesses, started smaller, smarter. Kept quiet, but never forgot. His daughter Helen, she has her father's spirit. Raised her girl alone after her husband died, made sure she got good education. Mia, Ryan said softly. You know her too? Mr. Wu studied him carefully. Be careful there. Old wounds run deep in both families. What happened to Marcus after he left? He went to California. Married, had another daughter. But his heart stayed here. Every few years, he would send money to help struggling businesses in the neighborhood. Always anonymous, but we knew. Last I heard, he passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Mr. Wu paused. He never stopped loving your mother, you know. Or wondering about the child she carried. Ryan sat in silence, absorbing the weight of these revelations. Around them, the community center hummed with activity. Children taking after-school classes, elderly residents playing cards, the continuous flow of life that had persisted despite the Thompson family's attempts to control it. One more thing, Mr. Wu said, reaching into his wallet. He withdrew a worn business card. Marcus left this with me years ago. Said if Elizabeth's child ever came asking questions, I should share his last address. I think he hoped, someday, you would come looking for answers. Ryan took the card with trembling hands. The California address was written in neat handwriting on the back. Thank you, he managed. Your father was a good man, Mr. Wu said simply. He would be proud to see his son asking these questions. But remember, truth isn't always enough. Sometimes healing takes more than just knowing what happened. As Ryan left the community center, he noticed details he'd missed before. The carefully maintained garden with its mix of traditional Chinese plants, the bulletin board advertising free legal clinics, the children playing basketball in the court where his parents had first met. His family's attempt to erase this part of their history had failed. The community had endured, and through Mia, the past had found its way back into the present. The weight of Mr. Wu's revelations settled heavily on Ryan's shoulders as he drove back to his office. The tension with Sarah felt more pronounced now, knowing the full scope of their family's actions. But he also felt a growing sense of purpose. He wasn't just uncovering his own history anymore. He was discovering a legacy of resilience and survival that ran counter to everything the Thompson name had represented. Mia watched through her office window as Ryan returned from his lunch break, his typically confident stride betraying a new uncertainty. She had spent the previous evening with her mother, Helen, learning the full scope of their family's history with the Thompsons. Now, seeing Ryan's troubled expression, she recognized the look of someone whose world had been upended by unwelcome truths. The morning's quarterly reports sat untouched on her desk. After a sleepless night spent wrestling with her grandmother's revelations, Mia had made a decision.
The way.
GHD of unspoken truths had burdened both families for too long. She gathered her documentation, old photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings her mother had preserved, and headed toward Ryan's office. His assistant tried to stop her, citing Ryan's do not disturb order, but Mia walked past with the quiet authority she developed over years of navigating corporate spaces as a woman of color. She found Ryan standing at his window, his mother's diary open on his desk. We need to talk, Mia said, closing the door behind her. About Marcus Chun, Elizabeth Thompson, and why we're both carrying the weight of their choices. Ryan turned slowly, his expression a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. I wondered when you'd come. After visiting the International District yesterday, you spoke with Mr. Wu, Mia interrupted. My mother called to tell me. The community still watches out for each other, even after all these years. Ryan gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk, but Mia remained standing. I've spent the last decade working my way up through corporate finance, earning every promotion, proving myself twice over because of my gender and race. I didn't know when I took this job that I was walking into my own family history. She placed her grandmother's letter on his desk, alongside a photograph of Marcus Chun at the community center. But now that I know, we have to decide what we're going to do about it. Ryan studied the photograph, his fingers tracing the outline of the man who had given him life. Sarah thinks we should leave the past buried. Protect the Thompson name, the company's reputation. And what do you think? I think I'm tired of living inside a lie. Ryan's voice carried the weight of his recent discoveries. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, it's all built on deception and abuse of power. The way my grandfather destroyed your family's business, forced Marcus to leave. Not destroyed, Mia corrected firmly. Changed, yes. Challenged, absolutely. But my family survived. We adapted, rebuilt, got stronger. My mother put herself through night school while running what was left of the restaurant. She made sure I had opportunities she never did. Mia touched the pendant at her throat. This isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a reminder that our family's strength comes from surviving what the Thompsons tried to do to us. Ryan stood, moving around his desk to face her directly. Then why come work here? Why put yourself in the heart of Thompson Enterprises? Because it was time. My grandmother knew that eventually our paths would cross. She believed that the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Mia smiled slightly. She also believed that change sometimes needs to come from within the system. Like Marcus wanted to do, Ryan said softly, before my grandfather stopped him. Exactly. Mia finally sat down, placing her collection of family documents on the desk between them. I'm not here for revenge, Ryan. I'm here because both our families are trapped in a cycle of secrets and shame. My daughter, Lucy, she deserves to know her full heritage, including the Thompson blood that runs through her veins. Ryan looked up sharply. You have a daughter? A 7-year-old who is our grandfather's eyes. Mia's voice softened. She's why I finally decided to confront this. Our family's past shouldn't determine her future. What are you proposing? First, honesty. Complete transparency between us about everything we discover. No more secrets. Mia gestured to the documents. I brought everything my family has preserved about Marcus and Elizabeth. Letters, photographs, news clippings about the business closures in the International District. And then we decide together how to move forward. Your sister isn't wrong about one thing. Revealing this history could have serious consequences for Thompson Enterprises. But maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe this company needs to face its past to build a better future. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, studying the photograph of Marcus Chun. Finally, he reached into his desk and withdrew a business card. Mr. Wu gave me this. It's Marcus's last known address in California. I've been sitting here all morning, trying to decide if I should contact his other family, let them know I exist. Mia took the card, recognizing the address. My mother has been in touch with them over the years. Marcus's wife and daughter, they know about you. They've been waiting for you to find them when you were ready. The weight of this revelation settled between them. Ryan looked at Mia with new understanding, seeing not just a talented employee but a connection to the father he'd never known. Have coffee with me? There's a place down the street, away from corporate politics and family legacies. I'd like to hear about Lucy, about your mother's journey, about how your family survived what mine tried to destroy. Mia nodded, gathering the documents, but leaving her grandmother's letter on his desk. Coffee would be a good start. But Ryan, this isn't going to be easy. There's decades of pain and privilege to unpack. I know, he said, reaching for his jacket. But maybe it's time for a Thompson to choose truth over appearance, no matter the cost. Over the next few weeks, Ryan and Mia began meeting regularly at a small cafe in Pike Place Market, far from the corporate towers of downtown Seattle. They chose this location carefully, away from the watchful eyes of both the business world and their families. The market's constant bustle provided anonymity, allowing them to piece together their shared history without interruption. During one of these meetings, Mia brought Lucy along. The 7-year-old sat between them, drawing in her sketchbook while they talked, occasionally looking up with eyes that eerily mirrored Ryan's own. Lucy's presence made their connection feel more real, more urgent. She represented both the weight of their family's past and the possibility of a different future. She asks about her family history for school projects, Mia explained, watching her daughter sketch. Until now, I've only told her about her father's side. But she deserves to know all of her heritage, including the complicated parts. Ryan found himself drawn to his niece's quiet determination, recognizing the same focus he'd first noticed in Mia. How do you explain something like this to a child? Honestly but carefully, Mia replied. Children understand more than we give them credit for, especially about fairness and unfairness. Lucy already knows that some people treat us differently because we're Asian. Adding the Thompson connection to our story, it's complicated, but it's also an opportunity to show her how families can heal. Their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. Sarah began appearing unexpectedly at Ryan's office, her concerns masked behind sisterly attention. During one such visit, she noticed the family photographs Ryan had spread across his desk. "You're becoming obsessed," she said, picking up a picture of Marcus at a community rally. "This isn't healthy, Ryan. You have responsibilities to this company, to our family name." "Our family name," Ryan repeated. "The name that was forced on me through deception and threats. The name that represents the destruction of my real father's dreams." Sarah's perfectly manicured nails tapped against his desk. "I've heard rumors about you and Mia-chan. Private meetings, long conversations. The board is starting to notice. The board doesn't control my personal life." "No, but they control this company's future. Do you think they'll stand quietly by while you dismantle everything father built? While you validate claims about historical discrimination and corporate responsibility?" Ryan met his sister's gaze steadily. Maybe it's time someone did exactly the T. The pressure came from Mia's side as well. Helen Chin, carrying decades of justified resentment, confronted her daughter after a family dinner. "I see history repeating itself," she warned. "You and Lucy getting pulled into the Thompson orbit. Haven't they taken enough from our family?" "Mom, Ryan isn't his grandfather," Mia argued. "He's trying to understand, to make things right." "Make things right?" Helen's laugh was bitter. "Can he give back the years your grandfather lost? The businesses that were destroyed? The families that had to leave the neighborhood?" "No, but he can help change the company's direction. Use Thompson resources to support community development, create opportunities, like Marcus wanted to do." Helen interrupted. "Remember how that ended?" The tension reached a breaking point during a charity gala where Seattle's elite gathered to support local causes. Ryan attended as Thompson Enterprises CEO, while Mia was there representing the company's financial department. They maintained professional distance throughout the evening, but their occasional glances drew Sarah's attention. She cornered Ryan on the balcony, a champagne flute gripped tightly in her hand. "Stop this now," she hissed. "Before you destroy everything." "Everything is already destroyed," Ryan replied. "It was destroyed the moment our family chose power over truth. I'm just trying to rebuild something honest from the ruins." "Honest?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You want honesty? I loved you from the moment Mother brought you home. I changed your diapers, read you stories, protected you from Father's expectations. Does that mean nothing because we don't share blood?" "It means everything," Ryan said softly. "But it doesn't erase what our family did to the Chens, to the entire International District community. We can't keep pretending that privilege doesn't come with responsibility." Later that evening, Mia found him still on the balcony. "Your sister looked upset," she observed, joining him at the railing. "She thinks I'm betraying the family by embracing my connection to yours." Ryan loosened his bow tie. Maybe she's right. Every step closer to understanding my real heritage takes me further from the Thompson legacy. Or maybe it's helping you understand that legacy more clearly. Mia turned to face him. Ryan, you can't change the past, but you're in a position to influence the future. The question is, are you ready to face the consequences of that choice? The gala continued below them, Seattle's powerful families networking and celebrating their own generosity, while communities like the International District continued to struggle against gentrification and economic pressure. Ryan thought about Lucy's drawings, about Mr. Wu's stories, about Marcus Chen's dreams of changing the system from within. I'm ready, he said finally. Whatever the cost. Neither of them noticed Sarah watching from the doorway, her expression hardening as she pulled out her phone to make a call. The Thompson empire had weathered threats before. She knew exactly who to contact to ensure it survived this one as well. While organizing her grandmother's remaining belongings, Mia discovered a hidden compartment in an old jewelry box. Inside lay a stack of yellowed letters, bound together with a faded red ribbon. As she began reading, her hands started to shake. The letters revealed a truth more complex and devastating than she had imagined. The correspondence was between her grandmother and Marcus Chen's mother, spanning the years after Marcus left Seattle. In carefully written pages, the two women shared their grief, anger, and resignation about the events that tore their families apart. But it was a letter dated 3 months after Ryan's birth that changed everything. Dearest friend, Marcus's mother had written, I must share something that brings both joy and sorrow. My son writes that Elizabeth's child was born healthy, a boy she named Ryan. But there's more. Through our connections at the hospital, we learned that Elizabeth had twins. The second child, a girl, was given to a wealthy family in Portland. Elizabeth was told the girl didn't survive. William Thompson orchestrated everything, ensuring both babies would be raised by suitable families, away from any connection to their Chinese heritage. My heart breaks for Elizabeth, for Marcus, and for these separated siblings who may never know each other. Mia sat on her grandmother's floor, surrounded by the physical evidence of decades of deception. Her mother, Helen Chen, wasn't Marcus's daughter as they had believed. She was Elizabeth Thompson's daughter, Ryan's twin sister, separated at birth through William Thompson's manipulation. This made Mia not Ryan's niece, but his biological niece, through an entirely different path than they had assumed. The proof lay in additional hospital records, carefully preserved by her great-grandmother. William Thompson's influence had been extensive, but Marcus's mother had her own connections in the medical community. She had gathered evidence, perhaps hoping that someday the truth could be revealed without fear of retaliation. Mia drove home in a daze, her mind racing with the implications. Her mother had grown up believing she was Marcus Chen's daughter, carrying the weight of his lost dreams and the family's demolished businesses. The reality that she was actually Elizabeth Thompson's daughter, separated from her twin brother through a cruel act of social engineering, would shatter everything Helen believed about herself. Lucy was at a sleepover, giving Mia space to process this revelation alone in her apartment. She spread the letters across her dining room table, along with the family photographs she and Ryan had been studying. Looking at them now, she saw what they had all missed. Her mother and Ryan shared more than just a passing resemblance. They had the same eyes, the same way of tilting their head when deep in thought. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, asking about their planned meeting tomorrow to discuss company initiatives for the International District. The simple message carried the weight of their growing friendship, their shared commitment to healing old wounds. But now Mia possessed knowledge that could destroy the fragile trust they had built. If she revealed the truth, it would devastate her mother, who had built her entire identity around being Marcus Chen's daughter, the heir to his legacy of resistance against Thompson power. It would force Ryan to confront yet another layer of his grandfather's cruelty. The separation of twins, the elaborate deceptions spanning decades, it painted a picture of William Thompson as not just a racist businessman protecting his family's reputation, but as someone capable of truly monstrous acts. The revelation would also change everything about the narrative they had been constructing. They weren't just cousins connected by a love affair between their parents. They were aunt and nephew, their connections simultaneously closer and more complicated than they had imagined. The very foundation of their understanding would have to shift. Mia thought about the initiatives they had been planning together. Ryan had been working to redirect Thompson resources toward community development in the International District, seeing it as a way to honor Marcus Chen's memory and begin addressing historical wrongs. But this truth suggested their approach had been based on an incomplete understanding of the past. She made herself a cup of tea, using the ceramic set her grandmother had always treasured. Each piece carried the weight of family history, but now she questioned everything she had been told about that history. The pendant around her neck, had it really belonged to Marcus Chen? Or was it another piece of the elaborate fiction constructed to protect both families from an even more painful truth? As dawn approached, Mia came to a decision. The truth had already been buried for too long, causing unintended harm through decades of misdirection. Her mother deserved to know her real identity. Ryan deserved to know he had a twin sister. Their shared commitment to honesty and healing demanded nothing less than complete transparency, no matter how painful the immediate consequences might be. But as she prepared for their morning meeting, Mia felt the full weight of being the bearer of such life-altering news. She would be destroying her mother's core identity while simultaneously giving her a new one. She would be telling Ryan that the sister he had grown up with wasn't his only sibling, that he had a twin who had been raised in a parallel life of half-truths and hidden connections. The truth wouldn't just affect their families. Thompson Enterprises itself was built on William Thompson's vision of power and control. This revelation of his willingness to separate twins and orchestrate decades of deception would shake the company's foundation. The board members who already viewed Ryan's interest in his Chinese heritage with suspicion would have to confront an even uglier history than they had imagined. Mia touched the pendant at her throat, wondering about all the secrets it had witnessed. The path forward was clear but treacherous. The truth would hurt people she loved, challenge identities built over decades, and potentially destroy the delicate balance they had been trying to achieve. But continuing to build a future on hidden lies would only perpetuate the cycle of harm that William Thompson had set in motion all those years ago. Sarah Thompson Pierce sat in her conservatory, surrounded by her prized orchids, as she watched the security footage from Thompson Enterprises on her tablet. The cameras showed Ryan and Mia meeting in the company cafe, their heads bent together over documents, their growing closeness evident in every gesture. Her finger paused the video, freezing on a frame where Ryan smiled at Mia with the same unguarded warmth she remembered seeing in old photos of Marcus Chen. After the gala, Sarah had hired private investigators to dig deeper into the past, hoping to find something, anything, that would help her maintain control of the situation. What they uncovered exceeded her worst fears. Now, watching Ryan and Mia grow closer, she knew she had to act before Mia revealed what she had discovered in her grandmother's letters. Sarah reached for her phone, dialing Ryan's private number. When he answered, she kept her voice steady. "We need to talk. Come to the house. Now." Ryan arrived an hour later, still wearing his office suit, his expression guarded. Sarah led him past the orchids to their father's old study, a room they rarely used since his death. The wood-paneled walls still held the lingering scent of his cigars. "Whatever this is about, Sarah, make it quick. I have a meeting with the board about new community investment initiatives." Sarah poured herself a glass of their father's favorite scotch, not offering one to Ryan. "You need to end this investigation into the past. Stop meeting with Mia Chen. Return to being the CEO this company needs. We've had this conversation. I'm not interested in maintaining father's version of the company. Times have changed." Times never change as much as we think they do. Sarah took a slow sip of scotch. "Did you know that father kept recordings of every major conversation he had in this office? Including the day mother told him she was pregnant." Ryan stiffened. "What are you talking about?" Sarah walked to the old desk, opening a hidden panel to reveal a collection of dated tapes. Father was paranoid about being betrayed. He recorded everything, then transcribed the important conversations himself. She withdrew a yellowed transcript. "This one is particularly interesting." Would you like to know what Mother actually said that day? Ryan R. remained silent, but his hands clenched into fists at his sides. She told him about Marcus Chun, about the pregnancy. But there was more. Sarah's voice took on a cruel edge. She told him she had already tried to end the pregnancy herself, afraid of the scandal. When that failed, she begged Father to help her make it all go away. She didn't want a child that would remind her of her mistake. Those were her words, her mistake. The color drained from Ryan's face. You're lying. Am I? Mother wasn't some tragic heroine in a forbidden love story. She was a scared socialite who got in over her head with a charismatic activist. When reality hit, she chose her position in society over everything else. Father didn't force her to give up Marcus. She asked him to make the problem disappear. The tapes, Ryan demanded. Play them. They're degraded now. But I have Father's transcripts, his notes about paying off doctors, arranging the European trip. Mother wasn't sent away, she fled. And when she learned she was carrying twins, Sarah let the statement hang. Twins. Ryan's voice cracked. A boy and a girl. Father arranged for the girl to be adopted by a suitable family. Mother didn't even ask where she went. She came home, married Richard Thompson, and played her role perfectly. The guilt ate at her, of course. That's what all those tears were about. All those moments of distant sadness you remember. Not lost love, just shame and relief that Father had handled everything. Ryan grabbed the transcript from her hand, scanning the faded pages. His mother's words stared back at him. Please, Father. I can't have this child. I can't destroy everything our family has built for a moment of weakness. Why? Ryan's voice was barely audible. Why tell me this now? Because you need to understand that there are no heroes in this story. Mother wasn't forced into giving up her true love. Marcus Chun wasn't some noble victim. They were two people who made choices, and those choices had consequences. Sarah moved closer, her voice softening. The company, the Thompson name, it's all built on practical decisions made by practical people. Not evil, not good, just necessary. And my twin? Was that necessary too? Father did what Mother asked. He made the problem manageable. One heir for the Thompson line, one child given to a family that could raise her properly, away from the scandal. Sarah touched his arm. You turned out exactly as Mother hoped, exactly as Father planned. Don't throw that away chasing some romanticized version of the past. Ryan jerked away from her touch. You've known this all along. Every time I talked about Mother, about finding my real father, you knew the whole truth. I protected you from it. Like I've always protected you. Sarah's voice hardened. Now I'm trying to protect you from yourself. End this thing with Mia Chun. Focus on the company. Or I'll be forced to make everything public. Mother's attempt to end the pregnancy, her begging Father to make it all go away. How do you think that will affect your precious plans for corporate responsibility? The board won't follow a CEO who's dismantling his own family's legacy. Through the conservatory windows, they could see the Seattle skyline, the Thompson Enterprises Tower rising above the city like a monument to decades of power and control. Ryan stared at it, seeing for the first time how it cast shadows over the smaller buildings around it, just as his family's choices had cast shadows over so many lives. You're right about one thing, he said finally. There are no heroes in this story, but there might still be a chance for redemption. He turned to face his sister. Release whatever you want. I'm done living inside Father's lies and Mother's choices. As he walked out, Sarah called after him. She'll never forgive you if you destroy everything she tried to protect. Ryan paused in the doorway. Maybe it's time we all stopped protecting the wrong things. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Thompson Enterprises stood empty except for Ryan and Mia. The Seattle skyline stretched out behind them, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished table. Between them lay two sets of documents, Mia's grandmother's letters revealing Helen Chun as Ryan's twin sister, and Sarah's transcripts of Elizabeth Thompson's conversations with William Thompson. So we both discovered the truth within days of each other, Mia said quietly after Ryan finished sharing Sarah's revelations. My mother isn't Marcus Chun's daughter. She's your twin sister, separated at birth because your mother, our grandmother, chose to hide her shame rather than face it. Ryan pushed Sarah's transcripts across the table. Elizabeth Thompson wasn't the woman either of us thought she was. Not a victim of my grandfather's control, but an active participant in separating her own children. She chose her social position over everything else. And Marcus Chen wasn't just a man whose love story ended tragically, Mia added. He was a convenient scapegoat for a woman who didn't want to face the consequences of her choices. My family spent decades believing we were his descendants, carrying his dreams of justice forward, when actually you're Elizabeth's grandchild, just like me. Ryan stood, moving to the window. Sarah thinks this truth will destroy everything: the company, our plans for community restoration, any chance of healing between our families. Mia joined him at the window. Below them, the International District was visible in the distance, its streets busy with afternoon traffic. She might be right. My mother built her entire identity around being Marcus Chen's daughter. Finding out she's actually Elizabeth Thompson's child, separated from her twin brother, it could break her. Or it could heal something that's been broken for a long time, Ryan said. Think about it. All these years, both our families have been living with half-truths that kept us divided. The Chens believing they were Marcus's descendants, carrying the weight of his lost dreams. Me thinking I was just William Thompson's unwanted grandson, trying to atone for his sins. But we're actually brother and sister's children, Mia finished. Cousins by blood, connected by more than just a history of pain and resistance. Ryan turned to face her. I want to tell Helen everything. Not through letters or documents, but face to face. She deserves to hear the whole truth from family. It should be somewhere neutral, Mia suggested. Not here at Thompson Enterprises and not at our homes. Somewhere that belongs to both our histories. The community center, Ryan said immediately. Where Elizabeth and Marcus first met, where everything began. Mr. Wu should be there too. He's been keeping parts of this truth for decades. Their planning was interrupted by Sarah bursting into the conference room, her usual composure cracking. The board is meeting right now, she announced. They're voting on whether to remove you as CEO. Someone leaked information about your investigation into the company's past, your meetings with the Chin family. They're calling it a conflict of interest. Let them, Ryan said calmly. I've already called an emergency press conference for tomorrow morning. It's time for the whole truth to come out. About Elizabeth's choices, about Helen being my twin sister, about how this company was built on separating families and suppressing communities. Sarah's face paled. You'll destroy everything.
No, Mia interjected.
He'll transform it. Thompson Enterprises was built on maintaining power through secrets and shame. Maybe it's time for it to stand for something different, for acknowledging past wrongs and working to right them. The shareholders will never accept this, Sarah warned. Some won't, Ryan agreed. But others might appreciate a company willing to face its history honestly. We've already had interest from progressive investment groups looking for corporations committed to genuine community engagement and historical accountability. Mia touched the pendant at her throat. This piece is passed between our families for generations, carrying different meanings for each person who wore it. For Marcus, it was heritage. For Elizabeth, shame. For my grandmother, resistance. Maybe now it can stand for reconciliation. The next day, Helen Chin sat between her twin brother and her daughter in the community center's main room, surrounded by old photographs and newer truths. Mr. Wu had brought tea, serving it in delicate cups as Helen read through Elizabeth's transcripts and the letters from Marcus's mother. I feel like I'm reading about strangers, Helen said finally. Marcus Chun, who I thought was my father. Elizabeth Thompson, who I thought was just another wealthy, white woman who broke my father's heart. Now I learned she was my mother, and her heart was broken in ways I never understood. She made terrible choices, Ryan acknowledged. Choices that hurt all of us. But maybe understanding those choices can help us stop repeating old patterns. Helen touched the pendant that Mia had given her. All these years, I thought I was carrying on Marcus Chen's legacy of resistance. Instead, I was separated from my own twin brother by our mother's shame and our grandfather's pride. You are carrying on a legacy, Mia said softly. Maybe not the one you thought, but your strength, your determination to succeed despite everything the Thompsons represented. That was real. That helped shape who I am. Mr. Wu poured more tea. Sometimes the truth of our heritage is more complicated than the stories we tell about it, but it's still our truth. Later that afternoon, Ryan stood before a crowd of reporters in the Thompson Enterprises lobby. Behind him stood Mia, Helen, and even Sarah, who had decided that standing with family was more important than maintaining old lies. Thompson Enterprises was built on a foundation of secrets, Ryan began. Secrets about family, about identity, about power. Today, we're choosing a different path. We're acknowledging that my grandfather, William Thompson, separated twins to maintain social position. That my mother, Elizabeth Thompson, chose silence over truth. That this company's success came at the cost of divided families and suppressed communities. He gestured to Helen. This is my twin sister, Helen Chin, separated from me at birth and raised without knowledge of her true identity. Her daughter, Mia Chin, now works for this company, bringing the kind of change that her adopted grandfather, Marcus Chin, once dreamed of. The reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashing. But Ryan continued steadily. Starting today, Thompson Enterprises is establishing a $100 million trust for community development in the International District. We're creating a scholarship program for descendants of families displaced by our past business practices. And we're opening our historical records for a full accounting of how this company's actions affected Seattle's minority communities. Sarah stepped forward, surprising everyone by adding her own statement. Our family's past includes actions we're not proud of. But today, we're choosing to face that past honestly and work toward a different future. As the press conference continued, Mia watched her mother and uncle standing together, their identical eyes bright with unshed tears. Lucy sat between them, holding both their hands, embodying the possibility of healing across generations. The pendant hung at Helen's throat, catching the afternoon light. Its compass rose design seemed to point toward a new direction, not erasing the past, but facing it honestly. Not forgetting old wounds, but choosing to heal them. Not denying complex truths, but using them to build something stronger than silence and shame had ever been.